Good morning and welcome to the final in our series on poverty and racial justice. My name is Rashida Scar, and I'm here with my compatriots from Surge Marin, which is showing up for Racial Justice Marin. And I'll introduce them briefly. Barbara Kaler, Lisa Bennett, and Chelsea Supowit. We're also joined by several of our guest panelists today, and that's Ida Times Green. We've got Nancy Weber and we have Ali Tambor, and I'll tell you a little bit more about them in a few minutes. But I wanted to do some housekeeping first. Um, we have a book list for this event if you wish to learn more about this topic. And we will post these links in the chat at the end of our program so you get an opportunity to continue your learning, your research as you think more deeply about these topics. And I think I'm going to switch to Lisa, who's going to share our land acknowledgement with us.
Wonderful. Thank you. My name's Lisa Bennett. I'm with Surge Marin, and I'm really grateful to be a part of this event. I'd like to start us off with a land acknowledgement. We honor the land we are on by honoring the first people to live here, whose presence was almost exterminated by colonial settlers. The people who first named this land were those who shared the languages of the Coast Miwok tribes, whose stewardship of the land needs to be revered and recognized. There are indigenous groups right here now in Marin County who are fighting to regain unceded land. One of those is the Alliance for Felix Cove, which advocates for the protections and restoration of the only remaining 19th century Tamalco Coast Miwok Tamales Bay, built home at Point Reyes National Seashore. The Alliance aims to re-indigenize the ancestral homelands of the Felix family, the last Tamalco family to live on the western shores of Tamales Bay at Felix Cove, known as Laird's Landing. To learn more about the Alliance for Felix Cove and support their work, and we will share this link also, visit alliance and the number 4 felixcove.org. It is essential that we remember to anchor ourselves in the land and in nature where the lessons of life reside. The first people knew this, and we need to learn this if we are to thrive. As Adrienne Marie Brown says, oak trees don't set an intention to listen to each other better or agree to hold tight to each other when the next storm comes. Under the earth, always they reach for each other. They grow such that their roots are intertwined and create a system of strength which is as resilient on a sunny day as it is in a hurricane. Many of us have been socialized that constant growth and critical mass are the ways to create change. But emergence shows us that adaptation and evolution depend more upon critical connections, dare I say love, the quality of connection between the nodes in the patterns. And one more quote from Octavia Butler, who says, everything you touch, you change. Everything you change, changes you. We are constantly impacting and changing our civilization, each other, ourselves, intimates, strangers. And in that reality, we are working to recreate a world that it's by its very nature is in a constant state of change. It's in this spirit of love and observing that we come together today to learn from each other and make new connections. Let's do this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Um, and Barbara is going to share a little bit about Surge Marin, so you get an understanding of the organization that we partner with. We're their longtime partners, and we appreciate their support so much. So Barbara, share.
Thank you, Rashida. And thank you all for being here. I'm Barbara Kaler, and I'm a volunteer with Surge Marin. Surge is the abbreviation for Showing Up for Racial Justice. It's a national network of groups and people that started in 2019 to bring more white people into the racial justice movement. And Serge Marin started in the summer of 2017 when, it was 2009, I think, I got the dates wrong here, sorry. When a small group of white folks in Marin joined with local communities and people of color to work against the racial disparities in Marin County. People of all races and ethnicities are welcome in Surge Marin. It's 100% volunteer-led, and it partners with 3 Marin-based community organizations. They are the Marin City Arts and Culture, Marin City Cooperation Team, the Multicultural Center of Marin, and a major part of our net fundraising goes to these 3 partners. And if you sign up for the Surge Marin newsletter, you can learn more about the events and actions in Marin County and around the San Francisco Bay Area, and to learn more about how you can be involved in organizing and contributing resources for the collective racial justice work in all its forms here in Marin County: internal, external, systemic, structural, and interpersonal racial justice work. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. So I am going to have us go ahead and start our videos for today. But before I do that, I realized I gave the names of our panelists, but I wanted to share a little bit about them. First, we have Ida Times Green. Ida is a native of California and a longtime resident of Marin City. In 2008, she made the decision to pursue higher education and was conferred a bachelor's degree from Dominican University of California in humanities. And subsequently, she applied for a graduate program at University of California, East Bay, and conferred a master's degree in social work in 2013. Ida continues to, she's currently employed as a senior program coordinator for the County of Marin, and she's establishing a Southern Marin social services hub. And she is also currently continuing to serve her community as she runs for Tamalpais Union High School District Board. So welcome, Ida. We're happy to have you with us today.
Thank you.
Well,
Happy to be here.
good to have you. Our next panelist who's going to be joining us today is Ali Tambour. Ali has worked in reforming the criminal justice system at the Anti-Recidivism Coalition, ARC, the Just Trust, and was previously a criminal justice reform program manager at the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, where he partnered with organizations and leaders at the forefront of the criminal justice reform movement, including the formerly incarcerated convicted people and families movement, the Last Mile, the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition, and many others. And having spent over a decade incarcerated, Ali brings firsthand experience with the criminal justice system and his strong technical skills to help advance critical reforms. Welcome, Ali. We're excited to have you with us today.
Oh, thank
And
you for having me.
I think we're going to have a great conversation. So look forward to going into that more deeply. And then finally, our final panelist for the day is Nancy Weber. Nancy is a board member of the League of Women Voters, Marin County, and chair of the Justice Committee. The League is a nonpartisan grassroots organization working to protect and expand voting rights and ensure everyone is represented in our democracy. They empower voters and defend democracy through advocacy, education, and litigation at the local, state, and national levels. Welcome, Nancy. We are excited to have you on with us.
Thank you. Hello, everyone.
Excellent. So without further ado, I think we're going to start our videos for today. Chelsea is going to share our first one, which is The Fight Against Voter Suppression, A Brief History. And this is a PBS Frontline video. It's about 8 minutes long, and it'll go a little bit into the history of voter suppression in this country. Chelsea, take it away. Thank you so much, Chelsea, for sharing those videos. A lot to talk about today, so let's just dive in. So I'm going to start by asking our panelists one by one to tell us a little bit about themselves. Ollie, I'm going to start with you. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your experience with the election and voting process? Why did you become an advocate for poll access and voting rights in your sphere of influence?
It kind of happened serendipitously. Like I worked for the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative as a software engineer, and our project got shut down, and then I ended up moving over to our program team, where we were supporting organizations led by formerly incarcerated people. And that got me involved with FRRC in Florida, which we just heard a little bit about, and the effort to re-enfranchise 1.4 million people in that state who had a felony conviction. And I want to kind of clarify, felony conviction in Florida could be something as simple as I met a gentleman who had a parking ticket, had moved. They suspended his driver's license because he didn't take care of the parking ticket. And that's it. Couldn't vote for life. And so being part of that movement was super exciting for me. I felt like I was back in the civil rights movement. Actually went to the 55th anniversary of the crossing of the Edmund Pettus Bridge and got to meet John Lewis. Unfortunately, he passed away after that. Got to meet the presidential candidates, and here in California worked on an initiative to re-enfranchise people who are on probation and parole. And I think it's fundamental to our democracy that everybody votes, and getting it out there that the people who can vote, we need your vote, and the people who can't vote, making sure that we get them so they can vote.
100%. That's a excellent story, and we can't wait to hear more about that as we go through our program today. Thank you so much. Ida, I'm going to ask you the same question. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your experience with the election and voting process? Why did you become an advocate for poll access and voting rights in your sphere of influence?
Wow, that's a loaded question.
You've been on both sides. Tell us about it.
Yeah. So I'm a longtime resident here in Marin City, and it was always just important for me from the day that I turned 18, and it really factors in from my parents and my grandparents. My grandparents were part of the Great Migration that left the South to come to California to work in the shipyards. And so just knowing the struggles that they had for me early on, that it was crucial and important, not only for me and for my brothers, but for us to really encourage and influence our friends to do the exact same thing. So at the age of 18, we're pushing that the importance of registering to vote, and the fact that your voice and your vote really does count, as you align it with who you are in terms of how you see yourself, your morals, your ethics, whatever the case may be. And so it's a I've never turned back moment for me. So I've always participated in elections. I've always encouraged people to do so. I always have conversations, specifically when it comes around to the election period, as to what is important within the sphere of the election. So it's just, I've never turned back.
It's part of your DNA.
Absolutely.
And I love it. I can't wait to hear more about what you're currently working on and some of your thoughts about some of the videos that we just watched.
For sure.
Because you have a great perspective. And last but not least, I have Nancy Weber, who's going to join us from the League of Women Voters. Nancy, same question. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your experience with the election and voting process? Why did you become an advocate for poll access and voting rights in your sphere of influence? Oh, I'm sorry, Nancy, you're muted.
Sorry. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I have somewhat of a similar story to Ida. I grew up in New Jersey. I'm of Chinese heritage, Asian American Chinese heritage, and not everyone got the vote. Like in the 19th Amendment when women got the right to vote. I did not. Not Chinese were actually the first race that was denied immigration, the Chinese Exclusion Act in 1882. And along with that came a lot of things about not owning property, not voting. So it's always been something that's been top of mind for me. I've voted 5 decades now. Every election comes, I go to vote. And I think absentee ballots are great, but I always like to go to the box, to the ballot box and watch my ballot go in. It's just something that's been ingrained in me. Like I was talking about her parents, my parents also, because voting is a privilege. And I like to exercise my right. It's my responsibility because it does affect, you vote for president, but it's down ballot. You go president, senator, all the way down to your local school board. And so you make a big difference in your communities. And one of my superheroes is the late Congressman John Lewis, and you're probably all familiar with his quote about getting good trouble, necessary trouble. But he has one that's very pertinent to today's event that we're doing here. This quote is, "Your vote is precious, almost sacred. It is the most powerful, nonviolent tool we have to create a more perfect union." And I believe that. We need to express our voices to see what we want in the future. Keep your hope up. And you may not always get what you want, but you can't complain if you haven't voted. So thank you.
I love it. And I'm so excited to hear more about what you and the League of Women Voters, how you're pushing the needle forward on improving election outcomes as far as getting voter turnout, all of that stuff. So exciting stuff. And Nancy, I'm actually going to have you, I'm going to ask you the next question as well. So we talked a little bit about, well, we saw a little bit about the history of voter suppression. And I know that there's a lot of confusion surrounding the Electoral College and the ways in which votes can be, the expression of votes can be deflected sometimes, it feels like, with the Electoral College. Can you share a little bit about this historical role of the Electoral College and how it influenced voting, how it's influencing its ongoing impact on voters suppression, and how, in your opinion, does it continue to perpetuate systemic racism in modern elections?
Okay, so one of the things that I think was not mentioned in the film is the gerrymandering of districts, where you might have a population that's concentrated in certain areas, and powers that be, the parties, the political parties, play games with the system and try to draw district lines so that those who are marginalized don't have the heaviest impact in a district. They try to divide the strength amongst different areas so that there's not really true representation for those who are maybe low income, marginalized, and economically disadvantaged communities. So that's one thing that's a problem, and that might continue to assist the systemic racism. But the example in, the Electoral College, you've probably heard a lot about it lately because the Electoral College doesn't mean that that was actually the popular vote. And there are each state, because obviously there are some states on the coast, they're more heavily populated than in the interior of the United States. They felt that, and this is a holdover from after slavery, actually, they felt that the states needed greater representation. If they didn't have a heavy population, they wanted greater representation. So now each state gets a certain number of electoral votes, and they're determined by the number of representatives they have in Congress, and then the additional 2 more votes for the senators, because every state has 2 senators. But in Congress, the numbers of their congressmen differs. And the last 2, well, not the 2020 election, actually with Hillary and Trump, Hillary had the popular vote. And I don't know if I have the figure right in front of me. Sorry, I don't have the figure right in front of me, but it was very close. It was like 2% off. And so people have been talking about abolishing the Electoral College for a while. There are only 2 states now, Maine and Nebraska, that have it codified that they can actually split their electoral votes. But otherwise, after an election now, if the person, whoever has the popular vote in that state, gets all of the votes into their pot. And currently you need 270 electoral votes to win the presidency. And so now there's a movement to have 1 vote, 1 person. There's a movement to go to popular voting as opposed to the Electoral College. And then locally, you've been seeing a lot of this ranked choice voting, which is an interesting way to vote, especially if you have like 4 candidates, you can start ranking them in your votes. And then everybody, it's complicated. It's a little bit complicated, but the first sweep is that they take everybody's vote, and those that had the first vote, if they gain more than 50%, then they get a heavy weighted average towards the top, and then it filters down. It's a really complicated system, so I can't go into it here, but I think the film did a great job showing you how this is perpetuated, and it still exists. The 2020 election was not won by popular vote, and 2016 was not won by popular vote either.
And it's really evident that this is a systemic issue, that it's not a matter of a few bad actors. This is codified and written into our systems. And so we're seeing that play out with some of these structures like the Electoral College, like ranked choice voting, like gerrymandering districts. This is all legislated decisions that are being made that, and some would say, decrease the voice of those who are most disenfranchised, most marginalized, and especially those who are, barely hanging on and needing there to be greater change. So thank you so much for sharing that perspective, and appreciate that. My next question is for Ida. Ida, what strategies have been most effective in your experience to disrupt the systems that perpetuate voter disenfranchisement and inequality?
What strategies? I think just the blatant truth, right? So right before we are into a huge election, like what's happening, what's about to happen in the next several weeks, you really have to educate folks on the truth, and really steer folks away from just the hypocrisy and the blatant lies that happen, and for me and for my concentric circle of friends, we begin to have deep dialogues, and I think that that's really important. I think it's important that it trickles down to your local communities and neighborhoods, and then expands out. And it's one of the reasons why, and we haven't had it as of yet, but it's one of the reasons why we gather people, we galvanize people, and we have discussions. And so I believe that when that happens, and people are able to ask questions, and you have facts that are behind some of the misinformation, that to me is one of the better ways to get people not only to feel comfortable about who they're going to vote for and why they're voting. And for some, like Nancy said, want to take their ballot to the poll and, drop it in the box. It makes a big difference. So without a doubt, you want to have in forums like this, right? So a few weeks ago, about 3 weeks ago, the League of Women's Voters came into the community and just went through like every single proposition, which is really helpful, because a lot of times you're on you're straddling the fence. Which way should I go? What should I do? And then, of course, it's very helpful when our elections department sends out the ballot book, and a lot of people are like, "Oh, that's like a telephone book." Back in the day when we used to get telephone books, but it's worth taking the time to go through. It's worth taking the time to find out exactly who it is that you may cast a vote for. And so I think collectively, when you start doing those things, when you implement those strategies, it makes for a better way, a better direction, personally, individually, collectively, to know that you've taken the time to educate yourself before you make a vote.
And I think you touched on something there. I think there is a strong social aspect to fighting misinformation. So I love the strategy that the League of Women Voters has of, let's talk about all of these propositions. You see a lot of stuff by yourself in your living room. You see the, ads come on TV. What's true? What's real? What's slanted? Are there, tweaks and twists to the message that I'm getting across this TV? Well, having, folks come out and let's talk about all of these propositions. Let's look at the pros and cons. Let's see what's actually written in those bills so that people can make an educated vote. I think that's such a fundamental and huge aspect of fighting that disinformation that can disenfranchise so many people.
Absolutely.
So I
Yes.
appreciate your highlighting that.
Yes.
Ali, I'm going to ask you a little bit about your work currently. Can you go into a little bit more detail with your work with Amendment 4 and what you're currently doing in Florida to battle voter disenfranchisement amongst populations there?
So, let me clarify. Most of the work is done by FRC.
Okay.
And working as in philanthropy, one of our missions when I was at CZI was to give a lot of technical assistance along with our funding. And what that did is put me on the ground with the people doing this work, which I started with. It was very exciting. I really felt like I was back in the civil rights movement, and I guess I'm in the modern civil rights movement. But one of the things FRRC did, first of all, the gentleman that runs the organization, Desmond Meade, I'm pretty sure he collected like 80% of the signatures to get Amendment 4 on the ballot, and so people know to change the Constitution in Florida, because it was written into the Florida Constitution. It takes more than 50% of the vote. I think it was 62% of the vote or something like that. But they came up with some really ingenious strategies One of them is because they had the funding and the assistance, they were able to take advantage of tools that mostly the two big political parties use. So things like phone banks, right? Most small organizations don't have access to that, but with the funding that we provided FRC and other funders as well, we were able to create phone banks. We also flew 1,000 formerly incarcerated people from all over the United States to Florida to help in this effort. We rented buses and we canvassed neighborhoods. And it was just an exciting time. I think probably one of the most profound things I learned is that the two major political parties, they really target people who vote every time, high propensity voters. And what FRC did is they said, well, wait, we have all these low propensity voters. Some of them, like the odds that they would turn out to the polls were like anywhere between 2 and 16%. But what FRC learned quickly is that if they were able to call low propensity voters and talk to them, and then most people in the United States, I think it's 1 out of every 9 people have someone who's been incarcerated in their family. 1 out of every 3 children has had a parent that has been incarcerated. So incarceration touches a huge contingent of our society. And so those low propensity voters, FRC, I like to say we, because I was there on the ground, was able to raise that from that 16% high to 80%. So by reaching out and talking to these low propensity voters that aren't, historically targeted by the two major political parties, they were able to get a huge voter turnout. And then, canvassing neighborhoods, and mostly canvassing neighborhoods also that historically had low propensity voter turnout. We were able to raise that up and actually got a constitutional amendment passed in Florida to re-enfranchise, 1.4 million people. There's some more nuances down the line where after that happened, that Florida is one of the purple states that is, it determined the 2000 election. And so obviously there's a lot of people, specifically the people who what I call want to cheat, that don't want people out to vote. That's a concern, right? Now you have all these people who are re-enfranchised. We had a presidential election coming up. So the Florida legislature changed the rules around incarceration and said, basically, your incarceration isn't finished until your fines and fees are paid. So then that cut that big pool of 1.4 million people down to, I think it was like 500,000 people. So then we started a new campaign or I should say FRC. I had to step back out of this because there was a lot of political pushback from the leadership in my organization. And I say pushback from government to the leadership organization. But there's a big push to pay people's fines and fees. And one of the things I started, I said I got to meet John Lewis at the 55th anniversary of the crossing of the Edmund Pettus Bridge. At that same time, I got to meet Bloomberg, and he actually pitched in $20 million to pay people's fines and fees. It was a crazy time, and sorry for the dogs. It was a crazy time. But once FRC started getting, I think Michael Jordan actually through me gave $1 million to pay people's fines and fees. So as we're trying to pay the fines and fees, it overwhelmed the clerks in all different counties. And so they were trying to get this done before the election, and the clerks were basically saying, well, we can't, right? We can't. And it's still going on there, and it's gotten a lot better. FRC is still with the big push to get everybody re-enfranchised, and I'm confident that over the next couple of years, all of those 1.4 million people will be able to vote. And it's awesome to see people who have been not able to vote say, hey, I want to vote. And one of the things that really compelled me when I was flying out there, when I was flying out to Florida, and I'm looking out of the airplane window and I'm thinking, geez, there's no lines here. There's no borders here. It's just land.
Right.
And it's like, I can vote if I'm in this state, but I can't vote if I'm in this state. And you think that, voting is really especially on the federal level, it should be federalized. Everyone should be able to vote, right? And then the other thing that really resonated with me is the taxation without representation, right?
Yes.
That's what this country was, that's what founded this country. And so, I'm sure everybody on this Zoom and our listeners all pay taxes. So, if you don't want me to vote, don't charge me taxes. And that's not going to happen, right? So the flip side is if I'm paying taxes, I'm going to vote. I'm going to fight for my vote. I'm going to fight for my people to vote. And hopefully we can make a change. There's also, I've worked with another organization called Vote in Louisiana. And they've got it. They have really have a mechanism to mobilize voters in local elections. And primarily, and I was guilty of this as a young man. Oh, my vote doesn't count. I'm just one person. But if you look at some of the local elections, whether it's for local sheriff or district attorney or school board, some of those elections in the small jurisdictions are won by hundreds of votes, not even thousands. And so what Vote has managed to do is they identify those elections and the candidates that they want to support. And they go in and they canvass neighborhoods. And they use the call banking and phone banking, and they're able to shape a lot of the local elections. So much so that now politicians are going to the vote office to talk to pitch their what they want to do, pitch their platform, and those type of things like super excite me. That people just at the grassroots level are kind of picking up the footsteps or the things that fell off after the civil rights movement and using new tools and new strategies, not only to get people out to vote, but to get the people that they want voted into office.
Absolutely. I think you've touched on something really important there, in that there's two things that I'm hearing. Is one, and I'm going to talk to Nancy about this next, the connection between finances and the right to vote, and the way that they utilizing almost a reinstatement of the poll tax for people who are formerly incarcerated by saying you have to pay your fines and fees. I don't have to pay my parking tickets before I can vote. Like if I've got an outstanding parking ticket, I can still vote. But if somebody else breaks the law, they've got fines and fees incurred through that, or maybe they've snowballed, their fines and fees have snowballed, because we can talk about predatory fees for people who are incarcerated. Having that be like, that's why you can't vote.
Yeah, there's one more thing I wanted to address really quickly.
Feel free.
And
Please.
in the video, they talked about re-enfranchising people in Florida and the idea that they would vote on the blue side, right? We ran mock elections when I was incarcerated at San Quentin, and you would be surprised, right? And I wish we could get that data out to both parties, because it's not necessarily true. Right?
People are coming from all backgrounds.
It's in the best interest for both parties to have everyone vote. And I think we have a contingent in either side that don't really see that yet. They need the education also. And maybe we could stop some of the voter disenfranchisement we see now.
I think you're right. Another point you made was the way that certain aspects of the populace are targeted for, they're wooed and they're, courted by these political parties. And usually it's middle class, upper middle class, that block of the demographic. But a lot of times, folks who are poor, folks who are marginalized, ethnic groups, immigrants to the country, their votes are largely not courted,
Right.
except in almost a tokenized way, occasionally. But by and large, the appeal is for people who are not on the edges. And the ways that politicians need to be educated that those are the folks that can really make a difference in elections. If you're campaigning heavily with people who have been largely ignored by both political parties, you're going to have a stronger base to work from. And I really love that point that as a country, our political parties have focused so often on the people who, are going to vote anyway. They've already made up their minds, they're going to vote. But so much of the, life-changing stuff that we'll see in communities is going to come from those folks who have not traditionally been able to get out and vote for whatever reason. So I appreciate you highlighting that. And so Nancy, I'm going to throw this to you as we're talking about this. Right now, the American public is facing turbulence in the current political climate. Financial challenges such as the inability to take time off work or afford necessary resources makes it difficult at times for people of color, especially those who are struggling with lower incomes, the working poor, to participate safely and confidently in the democratic process. Can you tell us about what you're seeing around voter suppression nationwide and locally, if you have some insight into that? We'd love to hear it.
Locally, I don't know of an example that comes to mind right away. It is Marin County. It's a wealthier county. But nationally, I think the films that we saw addressed it. This thing about ID, necessary ID. At one point in time, they actually had a proof of citizenship, and that was litigated, and it's no longer proof of citizenship. You can't vote if you're not a citizen, but you don't have to show your proof of citizenship. First of all, a lot of times people are citizens, but they're having difficulty getting the paperwork. Right. Like you're saying, the working poor have to work 1 or 2 jobs to keep a roof over their house and can't go chasing paperwork at these bureaucratic offices. But again, it was the IDs. We talked about the gerrymandering and the redistricting, and fewer ballot boxes was mentioned also, shorter periods for mail-in and ballots. I think one of the things that would be great is, it's not recognized everywhere, the importance of voting, having a day off from work or time off from work to vote would help quite a bit. I remember in one of the last elections in Georgia, there were long lines to vote, and it was hot weather, and people were handing out water, and people who were handing out water, being kind, were actually being chased away, threatened by, you can't do that. And I think they did it under the auspices of saying that they were actually trying to persuade a voter while they were waiting in line, but that wasn't true. And as you said, it's mostly the marginalized, underserved populations that are often targeted and trying to take away their vote. And of course, as Ali has mentioned, the systemic racism about the penalization of those who have been imprisoned. First of all, the United States has the highest rate of incarceration in the world, and we do not have the highest rate of violent crimes. And our population in the prison is mostly people of color. And before, here in California, when you served your sentence and you were released and you were re-entering your community, you could not vote. But that changed with Prop 17 in 2020, and so those who are out of prison, served their sentence, can now vote. And in fact, this past year there was a bill up for it was being legislated, but now shelved. It'll probably come back, hopefully, to allow voting while you're in prison. There are only 2 states in the U.S. right now. I think it's Maine and Vermont that allow you to vote while you're in prison. But this is, I mean, for criminal justice reform, many follow Nordic models, and that would be one of the Nordic models, because you are engaged, you're being rehabilitated while you're in prison. So we want to keep you engaged in your community, and it makes for an easier reentry. And hopefully less recidivism because they feel tied to their community. But the other thing, we're talking about one financial end. The other financial end is races, political races now are big money. And ours, unfortunately, our election system right now favors those who are older, wealthier, and white. And we're not older, wealthier, and white. And the population in the United States is actually changing to much higher percentages. And soon they'll be in the minority, but because they're deep pockets, might not make that much of a difference. But, we have to keep on working towards that. And the other thing is the younger generation is going to help, I think, make some of these changes, transformative changes. Right now, in the 2020 election, the millennials and Gen Z individuals only hold about 21% of the state legislative seats, but they represented 45% of the electorate. So we got to keep on working at it, keep on digging at it, and don't give up hope.
I fixed on a aspect of what you were talking about as far as how hard it is to chase down paperwork when you have a requirement that people have to show ID. It's like, who does that impact? There was a lot of talk around being able to use student IDs for voting. So young people are being disenfranchised by saying, oh, you have to have, this state or federal ID to vote. But homeless folks who are on the street, they might not have access to their paperwork to have a driver's license. So in all these states, it's like it's too hard. It's too hard to gather that information when you're trying to survive. When you have folks who are immigrant status, they're, like you say, sometimes working multiple jobs. They're having a hard time. I know a lot of older Black folks who they were born in the country. They weren't born in a hospital. They don't have their birth certificate. They're like, I exist, I'm here, I'm an American citizen, I was born here. How do you gather that paperwork? How do you navigate these intense bureaucracies to get the paperwork to vote? So there's a lot of issues there with who's going to have the easiest time just walking into a poll and casting their vote, and who's not. And what we're seeing is it's young people, it's older people who live in rural communities, it's the extremely poor, it's immigrants to the country who have complicated paperwork and case histories to get those IDs that they need. But somehow they're able to be taxed very easily. all of these demographics are able to be taxed. Somehow that's able to happen. They make that happen, no problem. We can get you your tax bill, absolutely. So we have the capabilities to allow these people to vote. It's a matter of will, I think, and it's a matter of our politicians actually asking for everyone to vote, everyone, and not just those who can benefit them the most.
The League of Women Voters has gone to San Quentin, working with some of the incarcerated there, and they have mock elections because they are very much involved, wanting to know what's happening outside, and they have a mock election. And if they were given the right to vote, I'm sure they'd be exercising it.
Absolutely. A lot of the conditions that drive people towards, criminal activity it's having a lack of resources, having a lack of options. What if, they were able to vote more resources into their communities? What if they were able to vote more options for them and their families? That's so important. So I love that getting people excited about voting in places like San Quentin is wonderful. Wouldn't it be better if they could have a say in how their communities look in the future? They could vote for those things that will help them stay out of jail. So that's something that I think, we all need to look at as, constituents as these bills come across in these elections, that we want people to be advocating for their communities,
Or
regardless of their background.
look at the propositions. I mean, minimum wage, affordable housing, they're all on the ballot now, and they're all central to everyday living and certainly affect those who are most marginalized and underserved communities. So,
Absolutely. I think it cuts to the heart of what people are really concerned about,
mhm.
including those who are currently incarcerated. Thank you so much. That's wonderful. So I'm gonna this is a question I have for any panelists, and feel free to answer, or just say, I don't have any stories on that. But we've heard about poll watchers, and we talk about, voter disenfranchisement. We saw this a lot in the 2020 election, where you had people who were just there at the polls to make sure everything, went smoothly. Uh, um, and in some voting locations around the country. Have you experienced that kind of, and the problem with that is that some of those poll watchers, it could be tantamount to, voter intimidation, intimidating people to vote a certain way and making people feel uncomfortable about walking in to vote. Have any of you experienced that? Have you seen that in your own experience while you're trying to vote? Have you heard stories about that in your own communities? Has that been an issue? And how do you think that affects communities who are on the fence about whether or not they're wanting to actually go out and vote?
So you know what, Rashida, I was just thinking as we're having these conversations, how powerful the vote is, right? The vote is really powerful. And to the point where, there are people who want to suppress it. There are people who want to marginalize others, to make it difficult for you to express your own personal uh, ability to vote for whatever it is. As Nancy was just sharing a few minutes ago, right? The proposition that's talking about raising the minimum wage. Why should that even be on the ballot? You know what I mean? It should be something that specifically here in Marin County, where the cost of living, um, the living wage, in my opinion, should be no less than $30. And we know how difficult that is, all right, for small businesses or whatever the case may be. However, here we have this proposition. But to answer your question, I and in my years of voting, because I'm a lot older than 18 now, I've never seen that happen. And I think because of the fact that we have poll workers, right? So if you're going to the poll, and there are people who still want to go to the poll to cast their vote, which I feel is really important for some folks. They want to do the process. They want to sit in that little booth and, and mark their ballot. And I think that's important. And I believe that the integrity of your poll worker, right? The person that you're coming into, that you are literally signing your name next to the sheets that they have. In many ways, they were because they're paid, hired to do that work, right? And the whole process, you're taking away the integrity of the process. When you have that person in the back corner that's looking over someone's shoulder or that's watching. And so we hear about these things, right? We hear about these things. Case in point, those two Black women, somebody help me because I forget what state it was, where their lives were ruined behind the false narrative that they were cheating or they were literally, not counting. No, I've never seen it happen. I think, and I'm glad that I've never seen it. I think the integrity of going to the poll, of if you go to the poll and you have the poll workers that are there, and they do remind you, right? Because you can't stand out in front having conversations. You definitely can't have your literature there or candidates information or anything like that. I think the integrity of going to the poll is still very intact, at least for Marin County. I don't know what Nancy and Ally's experience is, but
I think, Ollie, you want to share a little bit about that?
I mean, I can probably the worst case of voter suppression I've ever seen is in Alabama. There's an organization they're called TOPS, the Ordinary People Society, and it's run by Reverend Al Sharpton's younger brother, and he goes into prisons and jails and gets people to vote. He brings the ballots into them, and it's almost impossible to describe what it's like to have correctional officers, state police, electeds all around the prison when this guy is trying to go in and allow people to vote. And it's one of the things that people, I don't think we've touched on this, but there are, I think, about 500,000 people in pretrial detention, which means they have not been convicted of a crime. They're waiting to go to court, and they're eligible to vote because they have not been convicted of a crime. However, the jails do not provide a way for them to vote. And then the way the mail systems work, it's usually the mail's 30, 40, 60 days out. So even if your family members mail in your ballot to you, by the time you get it, you're not going to be able to vote. And then another thing we talked about, I think, Nancy, you touched on this 2.2 million people incarcerated in the United States. But even larger, there's 7.1 million people on correctional control, under correctional control. So that's probation. And when they talk, someone put in the chat, like California, you can vote after you're done with your sentence. Your sentence is not done until you're done with parole. Fortunately, ACA 6 last year passed, and you can vote with your own probation and parole now in California. However, in many other states, you can't. And some states have California, some has lifetime parole in some cases. So even if your state reenfranchises you after you're done with your sentence, if you're on lifetime parole, you're still not going to be able to vote. Right? So I mean, if you take that as a whole, I mean, you're closing in on 10 million people who can't vote or are really dissuaded from voting. Which is, people are getting taxed, paying your taxes. They're paying your lawyer's paying taxes, that whole trickle down effect of taxes. I don't think it's, the other thing is some of the laws that people are sentenced under, like you think about the marijuana laws. Now marijuana is legal in California, right? If people have been able to vote for that a long time ago, they might not even be in jail. right? But for me, the voter suppression I see is mostly due to criminal convictions.
Hmm.
Well, so I'd like to address that for Marin. We do have, Ali, we do have, of course, a large jail population, some of whom, as you mentioned, haven't been convicted of anything and are awaiting trial. And there are many reasons why they're still, in jail. That we don't. It's not always a bail situation because we do have zero bail on some cases, but I must say that our Department of Elections, Linda Roberts, they have been working with the jail, and it's been, it's not just because the league, we started doing restoration of the vote after Prop 17, but they actually had been in the jail prior to that. But there is a bigger push now to make sure that everybody is voting. And I've heard of places where they actually bring in a ballot box into the jail. We don't have that yet, but we're trying to get that there. So, so that we do have better representation.
I think this is something that we're really keeping an eye on here in California since Prop 17. We're really wanting to see how this changes our elections. How does engagement look? How does voter reenfranchisement look for our state? So I'm glad that these measures are being taken and that they're being consistent in pushing these legislations forward. And Ida, I know the last time we had you on one of these programs, we were talking about some of the ways that the criminal justice system, you're in jail, you're in prison, these systems that you haven't been convicted of a crime, you can't afford bail, you're sitting there, and how that affects, and that was one aspect we didn't touch on in that last program, is you can't vote in that state. If they don't have that mechanism in place, you miss out on your vote as well, and your ability to, serve your community in that way, even if as you're waiting for your trial. So there's a lot here, and the voter disenfranchisement looks different in different ways, whether that be people who shouldn't be, and we saw this, I think, in the 2020 election in the South. Those images really stuck with me of people, menacing people who are waiting in line to vote, and then law enforcement not stepping in and correcting that behavior, even though it is illegal.
In for when they wanted to give them bottles of water.
Yes. And there was, images of people using their, open carry. I'm just going to hang around the polls. It's intimidation, and the law enforcement can choose to, allow them to exercise that right while they're hindering people from exercising their right to vote. So a lot of this, again, it's a matter of will. It's a matter of, do we want to stand for voting? Do we want to make sure that everyone's vote gets that count? I think that's super important that we continue to work towards that equality, that fairness of vote as we move forward.
Absolutely, I agree too, and I think that we know that it exists, and so we really have to work towards galvanizing to disrupt, just across this country, right? Because we know that it exists, and so it's going to take folks like us, definitely young folks like Chelsea and others. Yes, the young lady who was in the video, folks like them, because you know that it happens, right? And I think someone said earlier, a local race can be won by a few hundred votes, and so when something is really contentious, and there are people who want to disrupt, make it difficult for folks to get to the ballot because they want to win it that bad, that we have to chart a course where we are disrupting these systems. We have to. it'll be perpetual.
100%. And I think this with the national election previous to this, I think a lot of young people got stuck into that loop. Oh, I'm at school and I tried to get my absentee ballot in and they wouldn't let me. It's like they got hit with some of those so they're seeing some of the problems that some of us take for granted because we're middle class, we're stable, we've lived in the same place, we're of a certain age. So it might be easier for us to vote than somebody who's struggling. And one of the videos that we were looking at as we were preparing for this program, there was a gentleman who was served overseas in Iraq, and he said it was easier to do absentee voting while he was in Iraq than when he was 4 hours away from his home state serving domestically. They would not let him vote. He had to miss a vote. And he was still upset about that. Like the ways that voter disenfranchisement is enacted at these local levels for individuals, that's where people are like, it's too hard. They've made it too hard for me to cast my vote. So that's something that we need to look at and fight as we're preparing for this coming election and all the elections to follow. Like, look at those case studies and then work to reverse that trend. So I appreciate what you're saying with that. Nancy, do you want to chime in?
Here's one good thing that's happening with young people here in the state of California. When they go for their learner's permit at the age of 16, they're sort of pre-registering for registration. So when they turn 18, they're actually going to be transferred over to the voter rolls. And so it's pretty automatic that way. And I think that's a great way to capture some of our young people. They really don't have to do it. They're interested in getting their permit. They go once and then they're on the rolls already. On the rolls beforehand. Yeah.
That's excellent. And I love that. And I think that, as people are going in for their IDs, because not everybody drives, especially here in California, if you've got good public transportation around you, you might not drive, but that should be standard for when you're getting your ID, when you're paying taxes, which we know they're very faithful about collecting those taxes. You can also be collecting my voter registration information. There's a lot of places where we're touching on those federal bureaucracies that we can insert those registrations in. And which reminds me, the deadline for voter registration is coming up very quickly. So please hop on
October 21st.
October 21st. In just a few days. So please get out, register. I know that the library is going to be pushing that information out over the next couple of days. We have registration places where you can register in the libraries as well. So please do, everyone, sign up to vote.
Question, and
yes, please ask.
I don't know, Nancy might have the answer to it. If you just a case in point, the guy from that you just shared from Iraq, could he not have gone to the local polling place or whatever the case and got a provisional ballot?
They would not let him. Unfortunately, he was stationed in one of those states that are very, let's say, concerned about voter fraud. And so he was having difficulty doing anything. He's on the base. Like, it seems like that's something that, his higher ups should have had his back on. But he did not get that support. And because they were concerned about voter fraud. No, I think what happened is he had let them know that he was going to be out of state. He let them know where they were going to be, but they made a mistake and sent his ballot to his home.
Yeah. So my question is, when is there an opportunity where one could get a provisional ballot?
Nancy, I'd love to hear.
I would say here in Marin or California, it's very much different. You can get a provisional ballot. by going to the Office of Elections, so you'd explain your case, then they do the discovery afterwards, and they'll actually let you know if it was accepted or not accepted. I think it's great now how they're tracking your ballot. I don't know if everyone is registered for that, but you should. I mean, it's a wonderful service. First of all, they contact you to say your ballot's being mailed in a couple of days. Then they'll tell you when your ballot has been received, when your ballot's been counted. It's a great means of, checks and balances here of what's happening, and your vote has been counted. So
I do have that service and I love it. And once you cast your ballot, they're like, hey, your vote is in. It's been counted. So it gives you that added layer of peace of mind that, okay, my voice has been heard. I've been able to vote, and I have confirmation more than just a sticker on your shirt. I have that confirmation that my vote has been counted. So
Lisa had a question for Ollie.
yeah, I'm seeing that in the chat. So Ollie, you had a point about philanthropy ignoring certain demographics. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Sure. Most of and I'm not saying all philanthropy, but I'm talking about the big institutional philanthropic organizations that are hyper interested in presidential elections, will pour resources into areas that are battleground states, right? But historically, the South has been just ignored. So if you take states like Texas or Georgia that have always been like a red state, and they look at them and go, "There's no way," or states that are blue states, um, like they don't want to get involved in those states, right? And so what it's done is it's made it so states, in particular down south, are not receiving the type of resources that they need. I know, and don't quote me on these numbers. I'm gonna kind of, so I know like in California and New York, philanthropy spends over $1,000 per voter across all issues, right? Not just voting rights, but access to healthcare, all other stuff. But when you get down into the South, it's less than $1 per voter, right? And by ignoring the needs of people in particular in the South, it just kind of perpetuates what's going on there, right? It's just not, and I have to give kudos because this was one of the things that really bothered me when I was working as a program officer. But there is an organization out there called the Just Trust, run by a wonderful woman. She was at the ACLU, but her name is Ana Zamora, and they are hyper focused in the South, and they are doing some fantastic work there. And for me, it's just so heartening to see that someone in philanthropy saw this problem and they're attacking it. And usually the way there's a lot of big egos in philanthropy. But once somebody starts going down there and doing good work, other philanthropists are like, hey, what are they doing? And they jump on board. So I'm very hopeful that the work of the Just Trust and Ana Zamora leading it, will bring a lot more resources down to the South, not only in criminal justice reform, but also, in stopping kind of keeping this voter suppression, right?
Right.
I mean, it's all kind of a package when you actually put it together. Everything's kind of woven in together, but seeing that type of investment down in the South gives me a lot of hope.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I've seen Ana Zamora. She is a powerhouse.
I
sure.
love her to death.
I think that if those of us who are watching these processes happen, if we could support those organizations that are, Ali, I might be reaching out to you after this to pick your brain about Like, who should we be supporting? Who are pushing the needle on some of these issues? I want to throw that list in when I email that out
Good.
to the folks who are registered for this event. We really want to make sure that people are aware of the people who are investing in these voting blocks that have been forgotten or ignored for so long. So I appreciate that input. Ida, I'm going to throw a question towards you. You know, and just going to ask, in the videos, we got a glimpse of some of the extraordinary lengths taken to suppress and sabotage elections. What would you say to people who are feeling disenfranchised by these tactics, uh, so that they don't even want to vote anymore? They just say, it's a waste of my time. How would you encourage somebody to vote? What are the words you would use?
Yeah, that's a great question. And to watch those videos, specifically the one, in the 1960s of crossing the bridge and, Bloody Sunday, that to me should be enough for folks who look like me, who understand having your voice suppressed, because your vote is your voice, having that suppressed. And so here in my community of Marin City, there's probably about 3,600 of us who reside here. There's only about 1,900 that are registered to vote. And a few years ago, like in 2022, I was running for an office. And so I went to this cluster of young Black boys, young men, because they were like 18 to 26, and I knew them all. And so when I walked up on them, of course, they're like, "Oh, there's Miss Ida," and some of them, they have that look, the baggy pants, the hoodie, the whole thing. Immediately, when you see, and actually, I took a picture with them, and I put it on my website, because you cannot literally judge a book by its cover, right? And so when I went over to speak with them, and that was a question that I asked them: "Are you registered to vote?" And there was only one within the group that was. And so I'm saying to the others, "Why are you not registered to vote?" And they had their various reasons as to why they were not, including, "It's a waste of time. Why should I? It doesn't matter, and all the things that go with it. If I register to vote, then I'm going to be called for jury duty and on and on." I'm like, that's your civic duty. It's your civic. So we did have quite a discussion, and I said, okay, it may not happen today, but I'm going to circle back around to you, because of the fact that truly, even with local elections, like the one that I was in at the time, it matters. It matters as to who do you want as your sheriff, because that's a local office. Who do you want as your House of Representative, as your senator, as your mayor, or whatever the case may be? Who is going to best represent you as an individual? Because I can tell you guys that the moment that some folks in this county look at you, they're going to see you in a very derogative way, right? They're going to look down on you just automatically without even knowing you. And but because I did know them, and I do know who they are and what they do and all these other things, just the image, right, automatically says that you're this person when you're not. And so having that conversation with them, it's like, the power is in your hands, simply through a vote. And so we're not done yet, specifically not in this community. In fact, we'll be out tomorrow, because Monday is the final day to register. I don't know if it's statewide or
I believe statewide.
Yes, yes.
Yes, and so we'll be out tomorrow, because believe me, I have not forgotten them, still know who those young men are. And I want to circle back around to them and say, okay, did something change in 2 years?
Hey, you can stop by the Marin City Library and pick up the applications. You hand them out.
Yeah,
I mean, much like local elections actually having more impact for us as individuals, local connections are the way to get people registered to vote. You got to talk to your friends, talk to your family, bring your stack of registration forms to church, bring it to synagogue, bring it to wherever you have a sphere of influence, bring it to your yoga class. We want the more people who are registered to vote, who are going to have their voice heard in these elections, that only improves things for everyone, because everybody will have a stake in having these changes happen. So I applaud
agree.
this. I love roadside with your friends on the corner uh outreach for getting out these election registrations. That's very important.
Absolutely.
I
And
appreciate
you
your
need
work.
to help people right on the spot. I'm like, I've done that. I'm like, we can fill it out right now, because I don't want you to take it and say, oh, I'll turn it in later. No, let's do it right now.
Yeah, we're here. We're here. Look, I just grabbed these from the library. Here, fill this out right now. I'll take it in for you. I love this. I love it. I have a question in the chat about Ida. I know that you have a lot of experience running for various different positions locally and on the state level. Can you share a little bit about that what that process looked like for you as an African American woman, like as your, grassroots community organizing, what were some of the challenges that you faced? Because the other side of it, the voting is one aspect of it, but who are you voting for? Like, what is the experience of candidates who are coming from a grassroots place? Uh, are people seeing people from their communities getting elected into these positions? Why or why not? That's something I would like to hear more about.
Yeah, I think the look for community members is a good one, right? When they see someone like myself who's running for whatever office it may be, like, there's a mirror reflection, because I too can do that. And I think it was stated earlier, and it may have been Nancy who said that it's very difficult for candidates who do not have money, because let me tell you, uh, the dollar is what drives a candidate. So I boldly, several years ago, stepped into the state assembly race, District 12, here in Marin County. And so that is all of Southern Marin and up to the tip of Santa Rosa. So it's vast. It's a lot to cover. And for just about every single endorsement conversation I got onto, the very first question they asked was, how much have you raised? How much money do you have? Even for myself, who I'm running for a local school board office seat, to go to the register of office and to file was a couple $1,000s. So that could hinder folks from saying, how do I do it? Because elections cost money. And I think for people like myself, it becomes a really grassroots effort for several reasons. Number one, I don't have the deep pockets that some other candidates have. I don't have them. And then two, the contingent to the seat. And so for this seat, it happens to be, for the local high schools, there are people that are saying, we want to support it because we want some representation. And so I think that matters in many ways as well. And so when you have some representation on the different boards, and you're going to get people to galvanize, to be behind you, to help push out your messaging and what it is that you want to do. But I have to tell you, Russia, it's difficult. It is very hard to be a candidate with no money because the more that you're, and it's for all of us, now, right now in this election season, look how many times you've seen a local candidate or a national candidate that you turn on the TV and there's been about 20 ads within a minute, you know?
Right.
So it really can be difficult. However, I think perseverance matters. And so you can't put yourself in a position as a candidate if you are not going to persevere and move forward with whatever you align to or align with for that seat, right? You just have to like go for it in a sense. However, I do want to say it can be very difficult, specifically when you don't have the money.
And when we talk about that, why people don't vote, I think people, especially people who have been historically disenfranchised from voting, if their neighbors were running for these positions and representing their communities, their neighborhood, I bet you would see more engagement. But oftentimes it's the deep pockets from other areas outside of your community that are running for and they're supposed to represent you. It can feel like, how can they represent me? They don't even know where I live. They don't even know what I'm dealing with on a day to day. So, having those grassroots organizations of kind of creating and building your own candidates that will represent you in areas of government from local to national. Why not? I think that's so important. And I think that's part of the key to helping get people to understand that elections matter. Like literally somebody from your neighborhood is running, like somebody is that. I think that's important. So I think that we need to share that. In the chat, we're seeing, the League of Women Voters are working hard over the next couple of days. This is the big push to get people registered. They're going to be at the grocery outlet in Marin City registering people. I think that's very, very important. And they're also saying from
October 29th.
October 29th is the vote early day, and we will be there that day too to encourage people to vote. Performing Stars Social Justice Group and the League of Women Voters are working together on that. So I think that's amazing. I have I have questions for Nancy and Ali as well. So I'm going to get into that. Ali, I'll start with you. How and where can we focus our efforts to address voter suppression in other states? And are there specific organizations that we can volunteer with to prepare for the upcoming elections?
Most of my expertise around voter suppression is going to be around the carceral setting.
Mhm.
And so I've mentioned a couple of organizations, Florida, which is FRC, Louisiana, which is Vote. I'm trying to think, North Carolina. I can't remember the name of the organization. If you go to a website, it's called FICPFM. And that basically has all of the organizations around the United States that are working on these issues. And I think they're a coalition of around 70 different organizations, but you can look that up there. But that's kind of where my niche is in the carceral setting.
Excellent. And I think I know the library is doing some work with San Quentin, with San Quentin being right here in the county. I think it's important that we look into how can we support efforts to get those votes counted as well. How do we ensure that our incarcerated population's votes are counted and their voices are heard? So, Ali, I think that's really important. Thank you for sharing that. I will include a list of these organizations in the email that I send out afterwards, and I'll also include it in the details of this video once it's on YouTube. Nancy, can you share the same question for you? How?
I'd give a plug. You don't have to repeat the question.
Okay, go for it.
I'd give a plug to the League of Women Voters because we are a grassroots organization and we are nationwide. And they are watching the polls and they are watching, what's happening locally. And so they will be there. But there are other organizations, political organizations that do this work. ACLU off the top of my head, and Indivisible, and Surge probably is doing some things. So that's what I'd say. You don't have to look very far to find these people because they're very vocal, which is we're thankful for that, right? So
Absolutely. And yes, we're very excited. The library's been partnering with the League of Women Voters throughout this time period. We're very excited to continue to work with them and get people registered and signed up and ready to vote. Can somebody from Surge come on and share a little bit about what Surge is doing to start pushing, getting the word out there and getting people excited about being represented? I would love to hear a little bit about your guys' efforts as well.
I can talk a little bit about that, just sort of hyper locally,
Yes.
for some candidates of color who could not make those filing fees. Surge got involved and helped put together, a little grassroots campaign to help them file to run for office. My goodness. And so, that sort of real super grassroots, tiny little campaign can make a huge difference and get people on the ballot. And then I know that Surge National has partnered with organizations run by people of color, reaching people of color to have these very conversations. And I don't know the specifics of it, but that's always something that happens, and it's always sort of in partnership with groups on the ground that are of these communities and want to reach these communities.
Absolutely. I love this grassroots, community-led push for having people's voices be heard. We're just about at time. If there are other statements that you guys would like to make, if you had any last thoughts for our communities, we would love to hear them. What is one thing you want our viewers, our listeners to walk away from this conversation with? Nancy, you're highlighted, so I might start with you.
I'd like to go back to what late Congressman John Lewis said, that your vote is precious and it's really the most very powerful tool. Don't waste it. And this is a long road. I mean, the struggles for equity, justice, and peace, it's not going to happen in November, but we're continuing on this path forward. We just have to continue to, as I mentioned before, dig away, and we'll make this happen. We often say that it's difficult. We're not heard by the people in power. Well, we go out and we vote and we put the people in power that will represent us. So
Fantastic. I love that. Ali, I'm going to have you jump on next. What is your last, this is one I want to leave folks with to think about as they're going about their day, getting ready for.
I mean, from my perspective, I've during my lifetime, I've never seen the political divide so bad in this country. And I believe that the only way that we the people take back our country and take back the whole political system is to get out and vote. You can't sit on your couch and complain about how things are going on if you don't go out and vote. And I think, it's getting to a point where we need to rock the vote. Like we really need to get everybody out and everybody to vote because, and there's some people who I believe just like when I watch the elections where the people run unopposed, right? So it's not just the vote, it's also people that need to get into politics and run for office.
100%.
But I don't think there's ever been a time in my lifetime where voting is so important.
I agree. It is right now, our voices need to be heard so much because there are so often being drowned out. I think that is so vital.
I mean, the attack on women's rights, the attack on textbooks in schools, the attack on people transgender, I mean, we have all of these societal things that are going on right now that I've never seen, as when I was a young man. I'm 58 now. But there's across so many issues, and people are making decisions for us that aren't necessarily our decisions.
Right.
And unless you get out and vote, your decisions aren't really going to be heard, right? And I know there's especially on women's reproductive rights right now. I think that is one of the biggest issues of my lifetime, and the attack on it. And the only way, right, really for us to allow women to have choice over their own destiny, is to get out and vote.
100%. I could not have said that better. I appreciate your voicing that, and we need that. Ida, same question for you. Same question for you. I would love to hear your thoughts, last takeaways from this conversation.
Yeah, well, first of all, I want to say that I appreciate the space and having this conversation. It's conversations like these that can absolutely influence and help folks who have not made a decision as to the power of their vote. So to leave anything, the power of your vote is your voice, and it matters. And I certainly am hopeful. As Ali has just said, it's so contentious right now in this country. It it is it makes it so difficult for people like those young men that I shared with you guys to say, why should I? Because this is what's happening right now. It's not going to make a difference for me to cast a vote. But it does. It will make a difference. It will absolutely make a difference. And so I really hope that, more spaces, like for the League of Women's Voters, for Surge, for this organization that's called Trap the Vote. Trap the Vote really targets young folks, and young people really need to know that there is power in their vote, because there's power with their voice. And we really do need to have people or elected officials that are going to best represent their communities, their states. And I'm hopeful that we can go in a direction where it's more civil in this country. We have to get back to that. We have to get back to civility for sure. So if I had to leave with anything, and that is it, there's power in your vote.
Thank you. I appreciate that so much. And it's something that it just occurred to me as we were preparing for this program, and as we've had these conversations, these vital conversations, they would not try to suppress the vote so much if it did not have any power. So all the gerrymandering and the voter ID laws and the sneaky ballot taxes and all of those things are just another example that they know it has power, and that's why they're trying to weed out people and keep people away from the polls. It's powerful. That tells you all that you need to know. And, as a librarian, a shameless book hustler, as I call myself, when people talk about banning books, I'm like, there's information there that you're missing. That's why they're trying to ban it. It's important information that you probably need to know. So this is important. And so I say the same thing about voting. It's important to vote. It has power. And we encourage everybody to get excited about voting, not just in the national elections, but on the local elections that really impact our local communities. Super important. I want to thank all of our speaker panelists who joined us today for this event. Incredible conversations. I'm very excited to share this out with the wider community and have them have a chance to hear all of this amazing information that is going out. Please register to vote. Deadline is in 2 days, October 21st, and then vote in this next election and all the elections following. I expect it. I believe it. I believe that and receive that from all of us.
Yeah.
I just want to thank a few people for their especially want to thank the Friends of the Marin City Library who helped sponsor this event. I want to thank Serge Marin who are co-sponsoring this event with us. And oh, I'm getting messages here from the League of Women Voters. Pat says you can still register at any vote center after up to November 5th. Thank you so much, because that's what I was concerned about. I was like, oh no, the deadline's coming up. If you walk into a vote center, you can register after the 21st of October. So please remember that. Get that word out. I'm going to try to get this video up onto Marin County Free Library's YouTube page as soon as possible, so this information has another way to get out there. Thank you all for joining us. Please check out our book lists. Please check out our the organizations that we mentioned in this program. I appreciate you all, and thank you again to our speakers. What a wonderful conversation. I'd love to talk to you guys again in the future.
Great way to start the morning.
Absolutely.
Thanks for having me.
All right,
wonderful.
folks. Thank
Take
you.
care,
Bye.
everyone, and have a great
Thank you.
afternoon.
Thank
Thanks.
you.